At least I hope. There we go. All right. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Clean and Renewable Energy Action Plan Citizens Advisory Board. So we appreciate everybody being here, your continued support, your generous gift of time, and as we move forward to transform the community to clean and renewable energy. The meeting today is being hosted by the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government Sustainability Office and being led by the South Face Institute. The first part of today's meeting will be the regular CAB meeting, followed by the fifth of 5 planned educational modules. Today's topic is going to focus on greenscaping. That's going to be a really pretty interesting thing. Just a few reminders before we get started. Today's session is being live streamed. Turn off your microphone when you're not speaking, and remember to turn it on when you start speaking. That's always a challenge for me. And you can turn off your video if you're having difficulty with the bandwidth on your computer and on this live stream. So again, thank you and welcome. And at this point, I will turn it over to Megan, I believe, with South Face Institute.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mike. All right, so let's get in there. So thank you all for your attendance today. We are excited to have all of you here. Today's agenda is our regular welcome, a recap of last month, and then looking back at what's been accomplished this year and looking forward to what we plan to accomplish next year. And then we'll wrap up with our education series, part 5 on greenscaping. We're going to do attendance a little differently today, try for some process improvements. And what we'll do is I'll just call out the name of the organizations on the CAB, and just when you hear your org's name, say present and identify yourself. And once we get to the end, if there are any organizations I haven't cited, please chime in and let us know. So first up, we've got 100% Athens.
Michael Songster, present.
Hi, Michael. Next up, Action Inc.
Susan Shaner.
Hey, Susan. Next, we have Athens Area Home Builders Association.
John Newland, question.
Hi, John. Sorry. Athens Housing Authority.
Rick Parker's here.
Hi, Rick.
Carly Dennis is here.
Hi. Athens Land Trust.
Tawana said she would be coming late.
That's right. Okay. Athens Technical College. One more time for Athens Technical College. All right. Athens U.S. Green Building Council.
That'd be me, Tom Lawrence.
Hey, Tom.
Hey.
Next is East Athens Development Corporation.
Caleb Spencer.
Hi, Caleb. Then Northeast Georgia Business Alliance.
I'm Shane Blackwell, present.
Hi, Shane. And W&A Engineering. All right, Amy, I didn't hear you, but I did see you.
I'm muted. Hi, Amy Kasane.
Hi, Amy.
Hey.
Then from the South Face team, you have me, Megan O'Neill, and Bailey Shea. GreenLink Analytics is part of the project team, but they flagged for me earlier today they aren't able to join. From our ex officio members, we have ACC Gov Central Services, ACC Gov Economic Development.
Hi there, this is Ilka McConnell.
Hey, Ilka. ACC Gov Inclusion Office.
Hi, this is Crystal Coburn.
Hi, Crystal. ACC Gov Housing and Community Development.
Melinda's here, so I don't know if you can hear her.
Melinda said she had some problems with that. She doesn't have a mic today, so she chatted in that she's here.
Okay, great. Hey, Melinda. And ACC Gov Sustainability Office.
That's me, Mike Morton, and I believe Maggie, you on?
Yep, I'm right here.
All right. Are there any organizations or individuals that are on that I missed?
Facilities Management's on here.
Hello.
Chief Data Officer.
Hi, Joseph.
Hey.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're glad you guys can be here. So, pulling up the agenda one more time of walking through what's happened to date and looking forward. And really, our desired takeaways for today are celebrating the work that we've done and understanding what's coming up soon. So last month, we reviewed our stakeholder lists and process and learned about energy burden and housing inequality. I want to thank everyone on the phone who was able to speak as well as participate in our energy burden and housing inequality session last month. I thought it was a really strong session and we were very thankful for your contributions. So since November, we've shared the final stakeholder lists with you, as well as a draft of the community survey. And we've gotten started with scheduling stakeholder meetings that we anticipate taking place in late January into early February of 2021. We are concluding, at least this go round, of our education series today, which is on greenscaping. It's hard to believe we're about to have 5 of these under our belt. We've been making good progress with those. And just looking backward for a few minutes on what's happened in the last year, thanks to all of your guidance and cooperation. So in July, we kicked off our CAB meetings and presented out on the GreenLink Advanced Clean Energy Scenario Energy Modeling Platform, as well as the energy burden data, and generated mailers and PSA content that we'll be using moving forward. August, we did a little regrouping, hearing the need for enhanced education in order to move forward with informed policy development, and we got started identifying the key topics for further education. In September, we walked through engagement during a pandemic and got some very insightful feedback from all of you on how to ensure that we use the right pace for a stakeholder process, given all of the constraints that people are facing, and maximize to the maximum extent possible the tools that we have to have an inclusive process that brings into participation all of the necessary stakeholders that really ought to be there. And we kicked off our education series with a Clean Energy 101 and an Energy Efficiency in the Built Environment sessions. In October, we did energy systems and grid policy education and really began identifying stakeholders for further engagement. November, we had our education session on energy burden and housing inequality and finalized our stakeholder list for at least our first go round of stakeholder engagement. And today we're doing greenscaping education session and moving forward with scheduling things. So looking, and throughout all of this, you'll see the line at the very bottom. We've been doing this with your feedback, and we're very grateful for all of the adjustments that you guys have encouraged us to make this into a better plan that will be more informed and include voices that need to be at the table as we develop it. We know this has been a really challenging year, and we are really thankful for all of the progress that we've been able to make and very proud of that progress. So what we've learned, I'll just do a quick overview of the education sessions to date. I won't read everything verbatim, but I will just say we've gone through a Clean Energy 101 and just remind you, I know not everyone was able to participate in all of the sessions, but they are all going to be posted online. Some of them are already there. Energy efficiency and the built environment, and identifying ways to advance that further. Energy systems and grid policy, really digging into the matters of where our energy comes from and the processes by which decisions around its sourcing are made. And energy burden and housing inequality, really delving into a lot of the key issues around those topics. And this is the feedback we've been hearing throughout the year, is that there's a really great need for education, of leaders and community members alike, as well as education around energy efficiency in particular. We've also had a recurring theme that low-income communities have urgent priorities and that there's a strong need for partnership across several entities to make sure that we're able to close those gaps in service. Small businesses have different needs from the broader business community and need to be engaged in every bit as meaningful a way in our stakeholder process. Minority communities need to be engaged from the start and engaged consistently. And within that, immigrant communities must not be overlooked, and faith leaders are a conduit to the community. So we know virtual engagement is going to present challenges, and we've been really grateful for the contributions and highlighting the need for even more strategic and comprehensive engagement throughout this process as we move forward. This is the feedback cycle we've been working through in terms of collaboration and feedback around processes across citizens, project team, community, project team, to ensure that this is an ongoing, constantly improving process. Some key numbers from the last 6 months are we've identified over 80 stakeholders, conducted 5 education modules, met as a Citizens Advisory Board 9 times, and generated 4 major communications materials. And we've had 1 extraordinary year. So thank you all very much. Now looking ahead into 2021, just lay out one more of these lovely chevron maps. So in January, we are going to conduct the first 2 of the 3 charrettes we've been discussing. These are the larger form charrettes, focusing on community and equity and clean energy economy. We're also going to initiate the one-on-one stakeholder interviews and mini charrettes and launch the community clean energy survey. In February, we'll conclude with that 3rd charrette around intersection of the natural and built environments. Stakeholder interviews are going to continue, and these broader town hall style community conversations will begin to get underway. In March and April, we'll continue those community conversations. By then, we should have generated sufficient responses to the community-wide clean energy survey to be able to do some deep dive analysis into community priorities and feedback through that survey and share them out with y'all, and get started outlining the clean energy plan. May through September will be a very iterative process of plan development and revisions, as well as working for your feedback throughout that process. And then in the fall, our target is to complete the plan and present that plan to the commission and get a formal adoption of the plan. And once again, throughout all of that, we'll be working with you directly to make sure that all of these things happen. And now I'll hand things over to Mike Ford for our next session on greenscaping. So Mike, let's go ahead and I'll stop sharing and you start sharing. Mike Ford, excuse me, not Mike Wharton. Mike Ford, are you there?
I am. I'm sorry. I just stepped away for 1 minute. I thought I had one more time, but I'm ready to go here. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we were really fast today. And while Mike's getting set up, I did post in the chat, and we may want to figure out a way to get it up for people who are viewing outside this web through YouTube. I put the link on the web page to these meetings and to the educational modules, so these are available for you to go back and look at. I think we've gotten almost everything up now from what we have done. I think we might have one more that we need to get posted, but you'll be able to direct people to that link, and we'll try to make that even easier as we move forward to get so people can access this information as they come look for these educational opportunities.
I have a couple of questions.
I'm sorry, what?
I have a couple of questions before we move into the education.
Jump in.
Okay. So one, I was just thinking that, I guess I'm partly here representing an industry, not just for my own edification and fun. And it occurred to me that I probably need to be thinking about who I need to reach out to in particular, and how to do that. And I just wondered if y'all have given any thought to maybe not really a newsletter, but writing up something, this kind of a summary of what we've been doing, of what the community input process is going to look like. And that we as CAB members could send out to, again, our constituents, people we think, who might not be already identified as a stakeholder, so that we're all kind of sending out the same message. Because I think that would definitely be helpful for me.
Noted. So noted. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So you said you had two, Amy?
I'm probably drawing a blank, but the community survey, has that been done? Or is that something that's being worked on? I just, that you were talking about launching the community survey, is that?
We had put it out there recently for, I think last month, for people to look at and comment on, and that's what we're going to take and then turn it into more of a survey that people can respond to from there. So if you have comments, now is a great, just as a reminder, if you need to go for us to get that available to you, but I believe it's in the file folder. But now is a really, really good time to finish up comments.
Yes.
I just, that went over my head, so I was thinking, okay. Thanks.
So any questions, any more questions from folks? This is a good time to do that. All right, Mike Ford, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Sharing my screen here. Let's see, sorry. I just pushed the wrong button. You are going to have to bear with me a second. I'm sorry. I'm getting the wrong view. Can you all see a white screen?
We can see the first slide, Mike, the title slide.
Okay. I don't know why it's giving me this bizarre view. So
and now we can see your presentation slide.
Okay,
you had it before.
Yeah, just reverse it.
Well, that's the thing I'm having. Hold on just a second.
And when you do that, it might make everybody else disappear. You won't be able to see all the other people viewing.
I'm sorry. I'm not at this problem. It's not okay. Can you see the white screen still?
That's got it. You're good now.
Title slide.
And now you can't see my presentation. Okay.
Now we can see your presentation.
Like with the
I'm sorry, you said you can or you can't see my presentation with the notes. You shouldn't see the note screen.
We're seeing the note screen.
We see the next. You see the next slide.
I'm really sorry. I've not had this problem. It won't even give me an option to stop sharing.
Do the display settings up there, and you might be able to change the primary screen. I don't know if you're working on two screens right now.
That seems to be the problem. And what I'm trying to do is just stop sharing and start over, and it won't.
Can you go to display settings? You should be able to reverse it though.
Okay, sorry. Ooh, yeah.
All right.
I got it now. I know what's happening now. Okay.
Okay, we can't see any of your screen anymore. I'm saying in case it was unintentional.
So Megan, what were you saying earlier about this amazing year that we've been having?
This is perfect.
We've all really improved our video conferencing skills, but have not quite gotten to 100% proficiency. That's something to strive for in 2021.
And I think I'm ready.
Yeah.
Everything I'm looking at here. So we've gotten through the first topic, which was how to work the WebEx screen share, and moving on to the next topics. In this session, I'm going to go through, it's kind of a lot of content, but we're going to go through at a high level and leave time. Please keep notes of areas that you want to come back to and discuss a little more. We have time today, and there are a couple areas on here that Mike Wharton and others may want to delve into deeper, where their knowledge certainly exceeds mine. But we're going to talk about plants, water, and soil, and green infrastructure practices, which we've kind of talked about a little bit in past sessions as well, and along with trees and tree canopy, and what's going on with land use and parks and public spaces. I think it's really important to keep this in mind, and this has come up in discussions we've had around this topic. Like, does this fit into 100% clean and renewable plan? Is it kind of a sideshow? My take on this, and it's an ongoing question as to how much you emphasize this greenscaping topic in a clean and renewable plan, but I say it should be. A lot of folks agree, in part just because plants, trees, and so on, a healthy environment is important for reducing a community's carbon footprint. And with these, with these practices come healthier neighborhoods, healthier communities, some workforce development opportunities, and really, I think maybe it's a little bit indirect, but I think these issues are things that you can use to get the public engaged in 100% clean energy plan. It's when you talk about plants and outdoors and wildlife habitats, that gets some people's ears, that gets their attention. And then you can get them engaged in other ways. So those are some reasons to go about this, to delve into this topic and why it's relevant. And this is to emphasize this a little more. I mean, the more you engage with the public on environmental issues, the more they're going to respond and engage back with you, and make sure folks aren't taking for granted the things that we still have in our environment and what we're really fighting for here. Why, in addition to reducing the energy burden and the other benefits that come with clean energy, we are saving our planet in a lot of ways. That's what we're trying to do. So I just say, don't underestimate the value of just getting public interest and awareness. And you all know this. And that, as we know, nature, these issues are one way to do that. So we'll start diving into the kind of the issues surrounding this topic. There may be others. We're going to cover a lot today, though. But as you all know, the choices we make, and it comes, the choices you make from your home garden. You don't even need to be a gardener, from whatever plantings you have around your home, how you take care of your yard, to the decisions we make around public land use. It's all connected. And, those choices affect the wildlife and habitats, which their health is intricately tied to human health. It's not just nice to see birds and bees. They go, we go. So that's my take on it anyway. So we're talking about wildlife habitats, the air, the waterways. It's all connected to our built environment and the choices we make there. So trees, what makes trees so important? There's, there are a lot of reasons. But just to get, quickly on the science, as we know, trees are carbon sequesters. As through the process of photosynthesis, they are pulling in atmospheric carbon and growing. When plants decay, when things decay, of course, they also release carbon. There's there's bacterial and plant respiration does put some carbon back into the atmosphere, but certainly nature knows how to balance that. And when we talk, I don't know if everybody's ever heard this term before, but the carbon sinks. A healthy forest is a carbon sink, meaning the carbon goes in there and it more or less stays there, at least for a very long time, until something happens to disrupt that forest. So oceans and lakes also serve as carbon sinks. Forests are extremely important, of course. The Amazon forest is biggest carbon sink on land in the world, but forests are vulnerable. Speaking of trees, and this may seem like it's jumping around a lot, but we've talked, and we're going to talk a little bit more in this session about the tree canopy and its role not only in adding more greenery to our environment and sequestering more carbon, but also in building performance. Trees, the shade from trees can reduce the need for air conditioning and so on in our homes, of course. With all these issues, as you're simultaneously trying to expand the use of solar energy, you may run into issues around solar air rights. And South Face Fields calls all the time from certain folks. It's not, they're not, often you get the same people calling again and again, but they're, the city owns these trees next to my house and I invested, so much in my solar system and the shade is blocking my solar system. These are real issues that are out there that to be aware of, and they've been studied, and it's not just trees, buildings. You never know when a 10 or 20 story building is going to go up next to you in some places, and that could ruin your solar plans. So those are things that communities need to be aware of in relation to trees and other buildings and development and solar. I'm not going to go any farther into it now, but just to raise awareness that there are good resources and studies out there, but this stuff is still being figured out and litigated in various communities. I put this title of this paper up here. This is a good paper. Somebody at South Face recommended it to me. It kind of covers all the issues, and we can include the link for those who are interested in studying this and knowing the scope of the issue and the potential and avoiding, basically looking to avoid problems. But back to forests. Let's look, what happens in a forest. So you have all this carbon sequestered. Of course, trees fall down, and as they decay, so you lose some of that carbon sequestration. But look at that nice image of that tree with all the moss over it. Of course, a fallen tree then becomes a habitat, almost a new little environment in itself. So it does balance out. And here is getting into a topic that I know Mike Wharton is passionate and knowledgeable about and may want to come back to, because there's some interesting stuff going on in Georgia in particular around this. But, forest fires went out of control, like what we've witnessed out west in the last few years, are detrimental to the environment in general. An out of control forest fire that's going to burn right down into the soil and basically destroy everything in its path is hard to argue that that's a net gain for the environment. But as every good forester knows, prescribed burns, which come in other names too, controlled burns or whatever, are beneficial. They are necessary. They're necessary because of human development having kind of interfered with the natural processes that forests really need in terms of the fire cycles. But it's important to keep in mind why prescribed burns are so helpful for the environment and why they're really necessary. And one is that when forests regrow during those first 2 or 3 years after a fire, you actually get, and certainly within 5 years or so, you get a net gain in terms of carbon sequestration because of all the regrowth that's happening. It's a necessary part of forest health when it's done in a prescribed way, not when you get out of control millions of acres burning. That's a topic Mike might want to revisit later. And I know, interesting stat, as far as I can recall, Georgia has the most prescribed burns in the country. And this contributes to what is a relatively healthy forest throughout Georgia. You think about forests, of course, you think about lumber. Lumber operations can be conducted, obviously, in responsible ways. And lumber itself is, once the trees cut down, that wood still is a sequestering carbon. So just to point out here, which then does certainly tie back to building science and where we're going with our buildings in the future. Wood's still going to be with us, and mass timber really does have some tremendous potential to help with the carbon footprint issue Here's a link on the lower right to an article South Face recently put out about what's going on with mass timber here in Georgia. There's been some interesting legislation. It seems to always be in process, but I think it's getting closer. Policy team might be able to give some insight into that, but this is the kind of thing. Wood is still our friend. It needs to be managed responsibly, obviously. Trees, like all plants, and forests in general, have a carbon budget. How much carbon can they really sequester? Some plants and trees have more potential than others. And generally speaking, there's certain hardwoods are better carbon sequesters when you're making these decisions. Hickory and poplar are great. Oaks are really considered the best according to a lot of people, because they live a long time and they grow relatively quickly. Maple grows very quickly also, which is a good thing, but it doesn't live as long as an oak. Pines are certainly dominant in Georgia. And in certain ways, a pine may not be as good as an oak, but pines also actually have an interesting benefit because their root systems actually store a lot more carbon for a long, long time, even after the trees themselves are gone, as long as whatever made them gone didn't destroy those roots. So that's just something to keep in mind. A pine may not be as majestic as an oak, but it's still a good thing. Now, on the same topic, you have invasive trees, and we're going to talk about invasive plants and trees in a little while. What this picture I put up here is what some people call it a paradise tree or an ailanthus tree. It's an example of an invasive species. I think this one came in because somebody thought it was pretty. But what happens with those trees is they take over, especially the edge of the forest, blocking out the vital plant growth that you'll find at transitions between cleared land and forests, basically blocking out the natural shrubs and plants and trees that we'd want to grow there. So when you see these ailanthus trees, you want to go ahead and eradicate them. And there are other examples of trees like that kind of, sure, they sequester a little carbon, but they don't get that big and they don't offer any other environmental benefits because they don't belong in our habitat. And that's a good segue into why native plants matter, and why certain invasives can be very harmful. Now, not all non-native plants are in and of themselves harmful, especially if you're talking about flowers and shrubs that you plant in your home garden. And many of these non-native plants have been planted in our surrounding environment here in Georgia for hundreds of years. So they're not, if they're not causing a problem at this point, but still there's no reason not to go native. Because your native plants, like this buckeye and this sawgrass, I believe that is, they provide, they belong here. They provide food and shelter for local animals. And they attract pollinators and other wildlife. And importantly, compared to invasives, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but compared to certain invasives, native plants have natural competition. So your native plants are not going to take over an entire area as kudzu. But, anybody who's lived in Georgia for more than 10 minutes knows where there's a nice big patch of kudzu that turns trees into these bizarre looking shapes. The history of kudzu is kind of interesting. It was brought in as animal and even people forage during the early 1900s. It is quite edible. People can eat it too. It tastes a bit like spinach. I've had it. Eat the young leaves, but you'll never eat enough to stay ahead of growth like this. I hear a goat can, but anyway, kudzu's here. We all know. We have a new menace on the rise in our forests called I always get stilt and sawgrass mixed up, but this is stilt grass. which comes from Asia. And this is not something that was intentionally transplanted here. It came over on some ship not very long ago in some crate, just some seeds, and it has gotten out. You may have noticed if you spend time in the woods, I don't think it's as bad down here in Georgia, but it's coming. This stuff grows in these open areas in mature forests where you would normally have native plants, native trees growing. It blocks them out quite quickly and dominates a landscape within a year or two. It can be controlled in patches, especially in kind of developed areas, but once it gets out into the forest, it's there are ways to control. It's not easy to control. You have to know what you're doing. You can't just go along spraying Roundup. But look out for sawgrass, or sorry, Mike, you'll have to correct me. It's stiltgrass in the forest. And I put these guides up here. This is a book that was developed by the University of Georgia, a complete guide to native plants for Georgia. And there's a great website as well, accgov.com, native plants. So plenty of resources here. And for you to get some knowledge around native plants. From native plants to soil and water. Soil, again, is a carbon sequesterer. And whenever you break up soil, you're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And this is relevant, of course, because Athens is surrounded by agricultural interests, and especially as you go out beyond Athens into neighboring counties. It's my understanding that no-till farming is the norm now in a lot of the state. That's good. The less you till, the less soil you disrupt, and so on. Other related soil and water management practices, and this is another area where Athens-Clarke County is doing quite well with riparian buffers or stream buffers. And that's where you basically maintain that buffer, that green buffer between the waterway and whatever land use lies around it, and that protects the water. It provides habitat, and it helps prevent erosion and other things. It protects the water from being polluted by whatever uses are happening there, and it provides, again, protects it from uncontrolled runoff and erosion. So keep up whatever you're doing in Athens. Let people know, homeowners, there's nothing that breaks my heart more than seeing, driving along through the country and you see this beautiful pasture land where whoever owns it makes a habit of going along with the weed eater along the creek that runs through their property. And it looks kind of nice, I guess, through a camera lens, but it's not a healthy stream if you're out there clearing the plants that provide buffer for that. So, and construction practices, I put that image on there just to note that it's the less native topsoil, or the more native topsoil you can maintain, the better. So, some practices, companies basically come in, scrape off whatever's there and fill it back in with fill dirt. Native topsoil is better, and we can get into the biology of that and so on. But construction can have an impact on this as well, construction practices. And I'm going to throw in a quick note here because we're talking about soil and plants. I'm going to put in a quick shout out back to composting and the role that it plays, not only in reducing the trash that goes to the landfills, but when you use, especially if you have a community composting programs that keep the compost in the community, you don't have to truck it out many miles to
audio.
Sorry? Good. Using compost can help protect your soil. It's not just good for your garden. It can help protect soil and just a reminder that 50% of what we're sending to landfills still is compostable. So there's a lot of room to be made there reducing food waste, or at least reusing food waste towards better purposes, and paper yard trimmings and other types of waste. And a segue from that into green infrastructure and go a little deeper than we did before. And just a reminder that what we're doing, what we're working on here when we talk about green infrastructure is controlling stormwater runoff. And what happens, especially during the first inch or so of rain, what we call the first flush, it basically, that's going to, especially in an urban area, we have a lot of hardscape, roofs, parking lots, streets, sidewalks. You're going to pick up whatever's on that surface, and that includes oil, grease, chemicals, sediments, pathogens, plus trash, and wash that down into the waterways. Another reason we talk about green infrastructure is about flood control and mitigating areas where you tend to get standing water that causes health concerns, it hurts property values, and it's basically is a wasted opportunity to make something better. So we'll go through a few of these practices. And by the way, all of this comes from this massive blue book, we call it. It's actually 3 volumes, Georgia's Stormwater Management Manual, and they a few years ago put out the latest edition, which was the first time since 2001. And this is where all these practices, really the technical aspects of how to install and maintain these practices comes from. It is hundreds and hundreds of pages. South Face does provide trainings in this area, which I'll go over briefly in a minute. But let's talk about some of the benefits quickly. There are economic benefits to installing more green infrastructure. It raises property values, it improves public health, and it provides jobs, not only through the installation, but the maintenance. It is good for the environment. We're talking most green infrastructure practices add more green space. And the practices you use involve native plants and choosing the right trees and so on. So you're also protecting your waterways again. And then the social side also, again, back to the property values and the public health and safety. There are a lot of places in the South that look like this, even on a day like today when it's just raining a little bit, maybe not knee high, but you're going to get that water in your neighborhood. I've got some in mind, and these can be treated. It's not really the ideal built environment for us to be walking around in floodwater like that. This graphic, I won't go through every bullet point here. This is something we use in our trainings to kind of reinforce some of the things I'm talking about. And you can see how it's all interrelated. And again, you also have the urban heat island mitigation, which is part of that is accomplished through the tree, through a better tree canopy, but also green infrastructure. Every little patch of green infrastructure is going to help with that. And we do seem to have a wetter future and a lot, more intense storms and so on. So it's time to give these practices serious thoughts. And then you also get, you end up with a society with more green spaces and parks and amenities that are actually serving an environmental purpose as well. Lots of different green infrastructure types. We tend to focus on the 6 that are in bold here, and I'll go through each one of these quickly as to how they differ. And you can kind of imagine as I go where you have seen things like this or where you can imagine they might be beneficial in your community.
Has joined the meeting.
Permeable pavers are, these are actually, what you see in this picture is actually just bricks, but instead of packing a bunch of concrete in between them, they're going to use special mixture of sand and bits of gravel dust or something to hold those bricks together. If you if you build that, if you know what you're doing with bricks, if you're a good brick mason, you don't need a wet mortar between those bricks, and that will allow. That's no longer such a hardscape. That's especially given what's underneath it, which is another permeable surface with all that gravel dust. Rainwater can now soak in there, and no longer just wash away. You're not going to be depriving the ground of that water that it needs, and you're not going to be washing away all those pollutants. So there are other kinds of permeable pavers. You can buy them that are actually made of pervious concrete. They cost a little more, but the pavers, again, provide a permeable surface. Pervious concrete is more difficult to install than standard concrete, but it is much better for the environment, especially when you're looking at a parking lot or even a sidewalk. It does require some maintenance. You can't let it get gummed up. One of the problems we have with pervious concrete is they put it in to a parking lot and then they build the building next to it, and you end up with all this Georgia red mud washing over the pervious concrete, and that mitigates the value of that concrete. So there are considerations, but the long-term benefits are worth it. So these are things to consider as you continue to develop your community. Enhanced swales, dry or wet enhanced swales. You see this is kind of a common sight maybe in certain parking lots, and you may not think much of it, but there's actually, what you see in the photo on the right is a patch of native grasses that are serving their wetland type grasses. So they're well suited to an area where all that water from the parking lot is supposed to rush into during a storm. And then the bioswale will manage that water. It will filter pollutants out as it goes through the soil and the plant roots. And then it provides kind of a little underground reservoir to help distribute the water. It's not going to handle your 500-year flood, but it'll handle the first flush of a typical storm. A bioretention area serves the same purpose. And, these graphs on the left are installation. These are the specs we use to train people on how to install these systems. And, it basically serves the same purpose as the bioswale, but it's a little more open-ended, so to speak. This is basically, instead of just planting whatever you think is going to look good outside of that building, somebody took the time to prepare the ground underneath with the right kinds of materials to help absorb the water, and then took time to choose appropriate native plantings for that area. All these practices need ongoing maintenance after a few years of big storms. You want to avoid a situation where you have to dig that practice up and kind of start over, and there are ways to do that. So those are considerations. They're also jobs. Quickly, this is a French drain. This is what you use to treat a trouble area. It doesn't really provide you much in terms of green space, but if you have an area that floods, this is a vertical pipe with a bunch of holes in it, surrounded by gravel, and that just lets the water get out of the way, off the surface quickly, and then disperse evenly underground, or get sent to another place, preferably not your neighbor's yard. So that's just an example of something else. I'm sure you have examples in Athens of these. These are some projects that Southface has been involved in with the city of Atlanta. And you can see these are big. I mean, that's a pretty big walkway going down there with the permeable pavers there. Historic Old Fourth Ward Park and the Piedmont Wetland Restoration Project. A couple more coming up. Green roofs, the City Hall green roof. Green roofs, again, are valuable green infrastructure. They also treat rainwater. They keep that rainwater from washing off as it would off a typical roof. And then, of course, they provide green space, nice workspace even for people, for building occupants. And importantly, Green roofs also insulate and therefore assist with building performance. So green roofs are good. And then some other examples. So, South Bay certainly stands ready to help as you move forward in terms of considering green infrastructure projects. Kick over now to green, the tree canopy. And I think we've talked about this before, but Athens does have a tree canopy ordinance with a goal of 45% plus or more maintenance. I think you're actually over that now, closer to 50%, 48%. Now, one thing to think about on this map, you look at it, it's a lot of that tree canopy is maybe outside the most developed areas. That's something Mike Wharton can probably speak to, as well as what kind of some of the goals are. But you do have, people have already thought of this. You do have a good tree canopy in Athens. There's probably still some open discussions to be had about what are the best kinds of trees to plant and where, because trees don't last forever. They need to be replaced and so on. So protecting the trees is another issue, which we'll actually touch on again in a minute. We already kind of went over this, but just to remember, I'm a big land conservation fan, so I just want to remind that what happens when you clear land for development. Obviously, you can't stop development. We still need places to live. We need new housing. We need new affordable housing and so on, economic development, but just making the right choices. And I won't get too preachy here. I think because, as we're going to see in a minute, there, at least in Athens-Clarke County, you do have good programs and good knowledge in place to help manage these issues. Not every place can say that. And I was frankly really, it was nice to talk to the group, to Mike and Maggie, and kind of learn about what's been going on in Athens-Clarke County. So y'all have a lot to kind of build on and be proud of. And this, actually getting close to the end here. These are some resources that came out as I was talking to Mike and last month, and they pointed out this website, which I was going to pull up, but given my history so far of sharing my screens, I'm not going to mess with it, but it's certainly worth a visit. It's a very fascinating, well-designed website that takes you can scroll down through a number of areas and see where the land conservation easements are, where one of the rich resources you have in Athens-Clarke County is legacy forests, which are defined as forests that are 80 years or more, where the trees are 80 years or more. It's not necessarily a protected forest, but it's great to have this map where you can see where these essential older forests are that we've inherited from previous generations, and that helps make decisions around development and other practices. So that's a really cool website. I'll be glad to pull it up after I'm done with my blurb here in a couple slides if you guys want to take a look at it. There's more, of course. Athens, you have the Greenway. There's a plan. This website here shows the plan. It's a little bit ironic there that in the foreground of that beautiful photo, and actually in the background too, it looks like there's a big mess of kudzu. But what can you do? And the other maps. Oh, there's the Legacy Forest project. Is actually a separate website that is worth investigating. And so you do have a lot of good things going on in Athens. I would just, keep the public aware and keep up the good work in that regard. And believe it or not, I think that brings me to the end, 45 minutes or so. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to questions, and I'll be glad again to revisit any of these topics and dive in deeper as needed.
One thing I was going to mention, kind of bringing together what Mike has been talking about, when we look at why are we looking at the landscape level for managing our properties, we're looking there at the mitigation that those properties and that habitat provide for climate change and a buffer and providing resilience to the community, sequestering the carbon, promoting healthy ecosystems and ecosystem services. So that's one area. I'd like to bring it directly to the energy aspect of this. When you look at things like the green roofs, green walls is another one where we're putting up green walls that go up the side of buildings, especially on appropriately the right aspect of it to reduce it. And with that will come reduction in the use and the heat gained in these buildings, and that will directly transfer to less energy needed to keep them and modify their temperatures inside, especially heat for the South. I will agree that all of those come with their own set of problems. None of this is a free ride when you get right down to it. Another interesting thing that has come out of some research is if you look on the equivalent of a city block, if you can get crown cover around 40%, that seems to be the tipping point when the air begins to cool to the levels of a forest. If you've ever walked in a city, you know how hot it is. It's 10 to 15 degrees hotter inside a city than it is when you walk through a forest. And what's interesting is that the research suggests that somewhere around 40% canopy cover is when that occurs. So if you look at those things together, they begin to directly impact our consumption of energy, right down to I wish I had a photo of this at the Georgia Square Mall, not the Georgia Square, but the Georgia Mall when it first got built. People drive around for hours to try to find a parking place 20 feet from the front door, and so you're out in this massive parking lot where they were doing that, where they didn't have a canopy cover requirement then, and yet. At the very back of the parking lot, there was one lone mature oak, and if they could have parked trees in the branches, they would have done it. I think eventually they wound up killing the tree, but everywhere around that tree, there was this cluster of cars. I wanted to take a picture to say, this is what people want. This is what people need. You don't have to crank your car up and turn your AC on high if you get out and your car's still cool. So those are some direct connections to energy consumption that we can affect, just not only add beauty, enhance ecosystem services, but we can directly affect the consumption of energy through that. That's my.
Well, I would add to that when you talk about the heat island effect, 40%, if you can keep in mind that it's part of the problem with urban heat island is that the heat stays in overnight. So if you can actually reduce that, then you can get to a point where people don't have to run their air conditioning all night long. So it's not just providing that coolness when that Georgia sun's beating down during the day. It's a 24-hour issue. So yeah, it can have a big effect.
Questions or comments?
I just put a link in the chat. It's got nothing to do really with us particularly, but talking about trees and that sort of thing. I just thought some people might be interested. It was a New York Times article that was in the paper, I think this last Sunday, about a study that's been done about the social life of trees and kind of the linkages under the soil. It was just a really beautiful article. And I think just kind of one of those things that we could all use a little bit of that right now. A little bit of anthropomorphization in it, but not without reason. I don't think so anyway. And I think I know sometimes you can't pull those up. I think I actually was able to make a PDF of it. So if anybody can't pull it up and wants the PDF, I don't think the PDF saved the photos. But anyway, I'm happy to share. So like I said, it doesn't have a lot to do with what we're doing, but Mike, you just spoke so passionately about trees, it just made me think of it. So
I know that article too, and it actually crossed my mind. It really is. I would second that. I've shared it around, and it's just inspiring. It's science. It's not just, I mean, it's,
no, that's right.
there's a lot more going on under there than we realized. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Then if there are no objections, I'll go ahead and pull up my screen again.
Let me mention one thing while you're doing that, Megan. Mike Ford referred to prescribed fire. And there really is a difference between uncontrolled wildfires that burn trees down and prescribed fires that clear understory. It is interesting. There is a brief bump in carbon production when you burn, but the invigoration of the habitat of the herbaceous plants underneath and the regrowth actually rapidly not only reclaims but exceeds that carbon sequestering that occurs from the growth of plants. And in Athens, just as a piece of trivia, so you can amaze people at the Christmas parties that you go to virtually these days. In Athens, if you stood in Athens, Georgia, the fire return rate was about once every 5 years. So for just about any acre you stood on in Athens, you would have been burned up if you lived about 400 or 500 years ago. Athens was also maintained through had extensive prairie conditions. They call them Piedmont prairies. They were maintained by both fire and the return of fire and large hooved animals, because Georgia and the Piedmont actually had elk and bison. They had a wood bison. The last one was shot out of Georgia in 1850. We had lots of deer. So all of those hooved animals would churn that soil up as they move through, and that would keep these prairie conditions when you combine that with fire, and then fire would come in and make all those grasses and herbs, herbaceous plants just go crazy. So we have a long history of our southern forests and natural areas being maintained through fire. It's one of the things we have reintroduced into Athens. We're hoping to do some small burns, even in more heavily urbanized area. Right now, we're concentrated out at Sandy Creek Nature Center. So if we will be hopefully burning sometime this winter. So if you want to see what one is about, it's a pretty fascinating process. And of course, feel free to contact us to talk about how those fires work and what the benefits are, and how we set those up to do them safely, and it also, who doesn't like a good fire, right? So let me turn this back over to Megan.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So we're running way ahead of schedule, but we have no problem with the. Yes?
I got a couple. Well, somebody, Amy just asked about the South Face trainings in chat. And by the way, I just dropped obnoxiously about 6 links in there from that I had referenced in the presentation. South Face trainings around green infrastructure. We have an installation training. We have operations and maintenance training. We do these. We're actually working with a couple of groups, including Greening Youth. We use them as workforce development trainings. We also have professional training that we use with stormwater professionals. So that's just a matter of contacting me. We'll do these. We don't have training scheduled. We just do them when people want them. So if you we can talk about what kind of groups would be appropriate for that. People in the landscaping business tend to be good targets. And also, Mike, this is a total random, unnecessary bit of trivia, but Mike just mentioned Eastern buffalo. We used to have buffalo in the East, and one of my ancestors is credited. He was a settler in Western Pennsylvania. He was credited with killing the last Eastern bison. That's a little family trivia that we shared through the generations, and that was a long time ago. But it is hard to imagine that we used to have elk and bison in these woods on this land at the time. And yeah, my ancestors helped wipe them out, but I take responsibility. There we go.
Now, Mike, you've got me thinking I have to find some sort of piece of family trivia to share, but I'm coming up empty right now. Maybe next time.
if Southface can send out contact information on training opportunities and who to contact for training opportunities, if you can forward that to the mailing list for the CAB, we can not only will that pass that along for this, but folks can feel free to pass that along to others who are interested in providing that kind of training opportunities. So maybe a list of what you do provide, and then if there's any customized training you can provide, I think that would be really beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Amy. Were there any other questions in the chat or that anyone needs to ask now before we start to close things down?
I had a question. I had someone come to the door when Amy was asking her question about documents that we may have needed to look at, and so I missed what that was. So I'm wondering if I'm missing some documents that I need to look at and return comment on.
We can resurface the most recent email about that. The one that I'm certain came to mind and that we discussed with Amy was the community clean energy survey draft that was sent around after our last CAB meeting, but we'll resurface that email. There might be one or two other items in there I'm forgetting about.
And are those things ending up in our folders permanently or not?
Yes, we'll confirm those are in there.
Okay.
After this, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael had mentioned that he wasn't able to. He didn't see them in the CAB folder. So if we could just check to make sure that I think he was also interested in like the stakeholder list, I believe was another thing.
The only stakeholder list I have in my folder is one from September, and maybe like the first one that came out. I don't see a final one in my folder. And I don't know whether that's a problem on my end or whether they're not there or what that is. Or maybe there's not one that's been updated since then.
I think it has been updated.
Yeah. We'll go and confirm though. Thank you for flagging that.
Okay.
And then Megan, are you guys going to send out a update email for folks so they can link pretty easily straight to whatever to those different documents?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there'll be a follow-up, Michael, for you and everybody else too.
All right. Thank you. So our next CAB meeting is scheduled for January 20th. I know our team at Southface and Mike's team are going to be out towards the end of the month, as I hope all of you are getting some well-deserved rest time. Really, just one more time, we want to extend our thanks to you for helping us accomplish all that we've been able to get done this year. We know this year has been full of challenges and really hope that moving into the coming year, we'll be able to continue to make the progress we have and hopefully under better conditions for everybody. So thank you so much for your time today. Be well and happy holidays.
Well, and let me follow up with one thing. At the 20th meeting, we will have a huge focus on our stakeholder meetings because they will be following up within 2 weeks we'll have them started actually. I think it's the first of the next week is when we're going to be starting those. So it's going to be a great meeting. So I'd like to echo what Megan said about having a happy holidays and thank you all for your time. It has been invaluable and much appreciated.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays, y'all.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Rest well.
Kill
Yeah,
my-
Happy New Year for sure.
Has left the meeting.
Happy holidays.
Hey, Tawana.
Hello.
Hey, Tawana.
Good to see you all.
Mike, don't forget we got to go fishing one day.
Hey, you are on, man. No joke. I am with you.
And we can take Tawana too.
Yeah, actually, I'm a country girl. I like fishing.
Oh,
She
do
does.
ya?
I can't fish, but I like to go.
Okay. That'll be great.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care.
Has left the
Bye-bye.
meeting.